The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
It's time to attack. With the Attack Style Wrestling Podcast. Here on the Attack Style Wrestling Podcast, you'll find youth and high school coaching tips for coaches, parents, and wrestlers, featuring Gable-trained NCAA champion and Hall of Fame high school coach Daryl Weber. Also featured is a monthly dialogue with legendary wrestling coach Dan Gable. Find out more on AttackStyleWrestling.com. Now, on to the show. And welcome back to the Attack Style Wrestling Podcast. Jason Bryant here with you with NCAA wrestling champion and Hall of Fame high school coach Daryl Weber. And today we're talking about those things that every teacher loves to talk about. That's right. It's the standards of learning. No, I'm just kidding. Today we're talking about the things wrestling coaches will want to talk about, the standards of learning as it relates to wrestling. Coach Weber, you've got an interesting theory with this. And first of all, why did you come up with this name that is so polarizing in education?
Well, I mean, the longest time, I'd always wanted to create, and I kind of did it a little bit here and there. It was create, basically a rank type system like for martial arts, and I wanted to do it for wrestling. And so when I first started Attack Style Wrestling, I created what I called the Ultimate Wrestling System, and it's 20 hours of technique, and basically, I had an outline that I had tweaked for 15 years, a technique outline that I used to teach within my own program. So I had that, and I went in and broke it into segments, top, bottom, neutral, and then even further where, you had your half series, your chicken wing series for the top and so on. And then you had your stand-up series, your sit-out switch, for on the bottom, and the same thing in the neutral position. And each of those little sequences was like a clinic. So it was basically like me and two wrestlers doing a clinic for whoever's watching that video. And I presented all the techniques with a color-coded tiered outline, and people really liked it. So there's 10 DVDs, but it was, there was a lot of information there. You still could get a lot out of it, but you had to invest some time to decipher it all. So as I kept putting more time into the Attack Style Wrestling, and then we got our Gable trained members area going, and I started to create practice plans. And I started off just like we've gone over in the podcast, and just teaching people how to run a practice. And I would show them how I would do it, and I would put my practice plan together at the beginning of the year, and I'd put things on note cards and kind of the old school way that I would do it. And a lot of people like that. I'd see them at wrestling tournaments, and they'd be, "Hey man, I've been using note cards just like you were showing in your videos," and they were liking that. But it still took a lot of planning. Like a veteran coach could look at that and be like, "Oh yeah, I do this. Let's tweak this, and okay, now I'm going to chunk this out into these note cards, and this is how we're going to teach practice." And they could figure it out pretty quick. But the bulk of the coaches, maybe the new coach is a volunteer coach, somebody just coming in, somebody just starting, maybe wrestled in high school and got roped into coaching their high school team. It was still a lot to decipher and put together in the right way. So what I did is I came up with it's just the term I came up with, the standards of learning. So I wanted to create a starting point where you could use for beginners, for youth, and then each level has a test at the end. So you can go through and you check off if they know the techniques that they're supposed to know after going through that set of practices. So I would start it off, and I chunked out the techniques that I felt you need to learn right away, and then the next level and the next level. So I had the techniques, and then I laid them out into practices, complete practices with talks, with speeches at the beginning, with drills, with warm-up drills, with how to teach technique, with the live wrestling situations that go with the technique you just taught. And then the next practice, you would review stuff from the practice before. You'd introduce new stuff, use drills to keep working the techniques that they've been exposed to. And just like I would my own practice, there's complete. So this is the standards of learning. That's how it came about. And it's still being built out right now. We've got about 2.5 levels built out, probably 30 some practices. And, I have coaches in the members area that are very successful coaches in like in Iowa. high school coaches, good programs that are using this. And, they're even like, hey, I don't even need to show much more than the level 1 coach, because you always got new kids coming in and you can kind of grab your better kids and show them a little bit more. But they love the way that it's laid out. And so in that members area with the standards of learning, like I said, you can take it as a high school coach, take that program, you could print off all the practices, all the techniques and stuff, and you could scale it down and say, hey, middle school coach, this is what I want you doing. Scale it down a little more. Hey, youth coach, this is what I want you doing. So that all levels are on the same page and they're going, they're learning the foundation for what they're at youth, for what they're going to need to know at the high school. And when I started coaching high school, I looked around, I started studying. I studied a bunch of people. I studied, I watched all the videos. And you don't even, I didn't have what they have now with YouTube and everything, but I watched all these videos. But I soon realized to coach youth and high school wrestlers, you had to be focusing on the right people. You couldn't just if you were trying to grab the flashy new funk rolls and all this and teach them to your team, the masses in your program, you were going to waste a lot of time. So I started focusing on, one of the first people that I could tell really got it when I'm talking about building a program was the Granby system. Now, do I believe that you should be spending hours and hours on Granby rolls? No, but they had it down. They had a system, and I know that Coach Martin had it documented, and he basically told his middle school what to teach, his youth what to teach, and those kids came in 9th grade clicking. They knew what they were doing. And I watched their videos, and there's a lot of good technique that they were working, and you could tell how it was all scaled out and built off of itself. And then one other person I learned a lot from were videos from Steve Sanderson, Cale Sanderson's dad, who was a high school coach for a long time, and he had some of the best top techniques I used throughout my whole coaching career as a head coach came from what I learned from him. It wasn't flashy stuff, but he knew the little things, how to throw a crossface and how to finish a cradle and stuff like that you could teach the masses from youth to high school. So with the standards of learning, I wanted to give somebody a complete game plan, and it's not a bunch of flashy stuff. There's stuff in there that as you progress what I say in a lot of my marketing is this is a program for day 1 to D1. You know exactly where to start the first day you step on a mat. Whether you're a senior in high school and it's your first day, or you're in a kindergartner, and you know how to progress all the way to the Division I level and have the skills to win a national title.
Talked about the coaching for the masses, and when you talk about the funk rolls, there are names that come to mind. Of course, Ben Askren kind of recently reinvented the funk. He learned it from somebody, and we're getting to the point where not every athlete has that in their arsenal. It's like you talk to athletes they're not wired to be able to hit a John Smith low single the way John Smith. Very few people can do that. And the same way that they're not wired athletically to hit a double leg on a reshot double like Jordan Burroughs does. When it comes to teaching the fundamentals, what are some of the important things to know, traits that doesn't have to be individuals, but you're not going to necessarily bring in the Ben Askren video the first day of wrestling practice for a room of 14 new kids.
Yeah, well, you got to realize these guys that are known for funky moves or kind of out of the box moves, they've got the fundamentals down. Okay, and as kids progress, they can pick up some flashy moves if they've proven that they got the fundamentals down. If they don't know how to sprawl and clear their legs and hit a go behind or work a front headlock or work on a guy's head or hit a good leg attack or hit a stand up. If they don't have these things down, they're already focusing on these elaborate scrambling systems. Well, they're wasting time at that point. And if you're trying to build a high school program and you're wasting time, you get a very limited amount of time. So you got to have a program. This was my philosophy. You got to have a program built on the fundamentals, because most of your kids are never gonna get to the level where they're hitting all that stuff. But you should be keeping up with that, with those next level moves, those funk moves and stuff like that, because you got to know how to implement tweaks into your fundamentals to squash those. So, every time we hit head of the outside shot, drilled our high crotches and our doubles and stuff, I had finishes specifically built to squash somebody that dove underneath my legs. They couldn't even get to him. Now, if it's a mismatch and one guy's really good and the other one's just starting out wrestling, he's still going to be able to roll around and do his funky stuff to him. But across the board, I kept up to date on what was going on. And if I got a high level kid who's on the national level or winning state titles, well, they're gonna be pulled aside and they're gonna learn some of that stuff. But everybody's gonna learn how to stop that stuff. And it's not a whole new series on how to stop it. It's just a tweak. If you're wrestling a Granby team, you can just switch sides off the whistle and shut down 90% of those guys. So there's just little tweaks that you got to put into your arsenal, your basics, that can usually shut down all the kind of flashy stuff. But those people working that flashy stuff and building a name off those flashy stuff, they know how to wrestle basics. They've learned the fundamentals when they were a little kid, and they developed a style on their own as they got better. And that's what you should be doing with your athletes. Is if they're putting the time in and they're climbing the ladder and they're getting good, and you got to figure out more ways to score, then you should be able to look at them as a coach and say this is going to fit in their style, and start teaching them, or send them off to camps, have them work with other guys, and they'll pick stuff up as they progress.
What about when you, as a coach, get to the point where you've got a kid that's he's lanky enough that his single leg defense, basically he ends up liking to spladle opponents, and that's what they start looking at. How much is it when you get into the standard of learning to be like, look, okay, you've got it, it works, it's there, it should not be your go-to defensive position. Basically, it's not like, okay, I saw kids do this all the time. It's like, because it's flashy, it's funny, and it makes people go, whoa. There's people that can hit that, like Nick Simmons, who hit it at the World Championships. Abnormal situation. Still, you're focusing on the fundamentals. How do you kind of make sure that those kids know that, okay, you're good enough to do this, but you still have to sprawl right, you still have to finish shots right, you still have to defend shots right before you get to that funk and junk, as people call it?
Yeah, it's to the system that we build. You're not seeing that stuff in the beginning phases. You're learning. You're making sure they're spending their time learning how to properly sprawl. And they're not just learning the techniques. They're getting drills and live situational suggestions on how to really bury those skills deep within them. So they're their go-tos. And then, like I said, then maybe in the off season or as they progress, you're showing them some other stuff, but you're always talking, you're always letting them know, if you show them a neck whip, which you shouldn't show anyone a neck whip for a long time, and I'll talk about that, but you better be telling them, look, this is last ditch. You should be squashing with your hips and going behind them before you ever try this, or you better have a huge lead to be dominating the guy and you're looking for a pin. You explain, as you're coaching them, you explain the situation, you explain the philosophy behind those moves. Because we would have kids come into our club, or maybe they moved in from another area, their family moved in, and they had all these bad habits, and it would take forever to break those bad habits. Because you get an athletic kid that's in the youth leagues or middle school, and they're just more mature than everybody at that time. Well, they can get away with a lot of junk. And if they got a coach just wanting to see flashy moves from his wrestlers, and they're showing them neck whips and all that kind of stuff, and they're living off of that through middle school and youth, once they get to high school, it's gonna be a huge burden on them, because they're not relying on the fundamentals. So you just got to make sure that your program is built on teaching the fundamentals first, doing a lot of drills, live situations, so that those fundamentals get ingrained inside them. You're talking about the philosophy, and then as you scale out, you're usually, there's so much good fundamental. When I'm talking about fundamentals, I'm not just talking about touch and go doubles and stuff like that. There's tons. There's years and years and years of instruction without getting into high risk moves. And that can take you all the way to the top. But to keep things fun, or like I said, you can send them off to camps, they can learn new stuff, but you just got to coach them up so that they understand what wins the big matches and what they really need to rely on. And then, there's certain situations that will call for maybe some big moves or, a little bit funky situations, or, you always want to have a good, some good pin holds in your arsenal as well, built into the system. Cause you're going to need that, if you want to win, you want to get a pin, win the duel, or if maybe a guy's behind. Seeing a lot of kids win big matches because they know how to hit that, hit some kind of hold from feet to back. So those are built in there. But yeah, you just got to know how to ingrain the basics and the best stuff into them the entire time you've got them.
Let's go into as you explained it, the mixed martial arts rank system. We know that other combat sports like karate, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, they mark their level of improvement with a belt system. He's a 4th degree black belt. I just got my purple belt. You hear that type of thing. How much of that is what you're trying to institute, or is it just something that where there's base levels of incentives for the coach to teach the athlete? And it's like, okay, you've got this level taken care of. Do you put a tag on them, or a merit badge, if you will, something along those lines? Be like, okay, these athletes are at this level. We know that they can go on to level 2, level 3, or the black belt, the brown belt, the plaid belt, for all we know. If you're an Edinburgh guy.
Yeah, no, I just basically set up a basic structure for them, and it's got graduation components to it with the tests and everything. And really the coaches can take these, they can tweak them to fit, what they're already teaching, but then they can use those structures and they can set up their own kind of graduation thing and give a t-shirt or a patch or whatever, whatever kind of fits their budget and their mentality. And maybe they've already got things like that going on. But I just wanted to set up, I didn't want to come out and say, hey, everybody's going to use the belt system that I've discovered here or created. No, I just want to create a system, a complete system. So, like I said, you can, the practices are laid out in our members area where you can pull up your phone or a laptop and you can just watch the videos in practice. Hey, what was he saying here? And everything's chunked out into small videos, or short videos. So I just wanted to create this structure that people could, tailor to their own needs and kind of run with. But I wanted it, I understand the value in systems though. When you just throw in, even though my Ultimate Wrestling system had a ton of value, great clinics and techniques and philosophies all in there, it still wasn't what I wanted because like I said, you can get a lot out of it, but it wasn't structured and broken down so that the volunteer coach could use it to run a great practice.
As we move forward, when you get the top and bottom of the programs on the same level, you referenced this with Coach Martin and Granby, basically more or less old school Granby, and then Steve Martin when he had his monster teams at Great Bridge. They'd come through the middle school programs, and this is also key that the feeder systems are in place. It's much harder to go feeder high school without Chesapeake, for example, out in Virginia, had the benefit of middle school wrestling. There are middle school leagues in places, and you're kind of ahead of the game if you've got a middle school feeding directly in your high school. But getting the youth coaches on board with the high school coaches, and there is a lot of turnover with high school coaches. This can go back to our building a culture discussion, which was on episode 26 of the Attack Style Wrestling podcast, where we're talking about building the right culture. But when you got to get those all into a cohesive unit. You see this with youth football. All right, we're a wing T high school program. The youth kids are going to run the wing T. We're going to run the wing T. We're going to run the wing T. So when they get into high school, it's plug and play. How do you implement that within the standards of learning and how to get it program wide?
Oh, like I said, it's all broken down. You've got at each level, there's exact practice plans to progress through the techniques that they need to learn to lay that foundation and then build off that foundation. So, it is a complete plug and play system. It is interchangeable. So if you're, obviously if you're the head high school coach and you got a middle school and a youth, the head coach is going to be calling the shots probably. So if he leaves, well, it's going to be up to the next one to kind of be on that same page. But if you're a head coach and you got volunteers coming in and out at the youth level or at the middle school level, it's real easy to say, hey, listen, you're part of this feeder program. This is what you got to do. And because it takes a lot of time, thought, and knowledge. When I couldn't put what I have right now, I didn't have it when I was coaching myself. I wanted it. I didn't have the time to put it together, put the videos together and really map it out like I have. So this is just something that probably a lot of coaches have thought of and wanted, and maybe some already have it. But I actually have taken the time, and I have the internet know-how to actually develop it and put it in a format that is easy to consume.
You say you use this day one to D1. For those that might look at this and say, "Oh, well, this is an overstatement." What are some things you see at the D1 level that are being taught day one to first-year wrestlers that are still being reinforced when you're an NCAA champion? What's Dan Gable telling you the year you win the NCAA championship that you're hearing the first day of wrestling practice when you're 5 years old?
Stance and motion. Let's start right there. I mean, you can go into any college room probably at the beginning of their season, and their coaches are complaining because their guys can't stay in their stance. Sprawl, how to hit a sprawl, square your hips, clear your legs, and hit a go behind. Basic single leg, double leg, high crotches. Everything is being taught up there. Stand ups, all of that stuff. Things, and they're the things that you're going to be teaching at a second grader is going to be scaled back, but it's the first step in mastering what you're going to need to know as you climb the ladder and as you gain experience and as you go to tougher competition.
Stance and motion. How underrated is that? As you said, it was the first thing you hear first. You hear it from Gable. You hear it in day one. What are some things about stance and motion you feel that are overlooked by coaches when they try to implement a system?
Well, I mean, you got to train your wrestlers to stay in what I call a shooting stance, a staggered stance, because that's how you score. You hit penetration steps. You get kids that come out and they want to just stand in a defensive square stance all the time. They're too high. Their butt's not low enough, so they can't lower their level and hit leg attacks quick enough. They're not moving their feet. They have heavy feet. So you got to be able to stay in your staggered stance, moving your feet, circle in the right way. All of those things need to be trained. Those things are things that my senior year in college, I knew I had to beat some guys that I had never beaten before, and I couldn't get taken down in these matches. And those, I broke it down to, hey, I got taken down because when he got a single leg, I fed it to him and thought I could throw a whizzer in and kind of hang on and just be, just use my athleticism to not get taken down. No. He gets my leg, I got to put that foot on the mat, and I got to break his lock, and I got to stuff his head, old school sprawl. And I would work that. I worked that for like the last month of my senior year in college because I knew it could be the difference between me winning a national title or not. Stance and motion drill. I would stay after practice my senior year, the last month, and stay in my stance for an entire match, moving my feet, circle, hitting sprawls, just making sure that if we were in the open, my feet were always moving. I was never caught flat-footed, so he could get to my legs, with a quick setup. Those are things that, and I talk to college coaches, and you can, in the beginning of the season, their guys come in and they're getting taken down because they can't stay in a good stance the whole match. Their feet aren't moving, and so I mean that's like things you should be doing from day one to D1.
When we talk about special athletes that have the fundamentals, and you've approached this earlier in the show when we were talking about wasting time. For some athletes, learning the funk is not wasting time, and some of it's just developed through sparring and play wrestling. And again, these are topics we've discussed on other episodes of Attack Style Wrestling's podcast. But when we get into trying to force a funk roll type of situation and trying to teach it, and we rarely see it work. I mean, there's special athletes that hit this, and then they end up basically you play. What's the saying go? If you're going to get into you get into an argument with, I don't know, what is it about pigs and mud because the pig enjoys it. Basically, you get into a funk roll situation with a guy who likes the funk rolls. You're going to lose that battle. Why is it important to focus on fundamentals versus trying to combat a guy that's going to be rolling you around left and right?
Well, those techniques, there's just, like I said, there's minor tweaks or things that you got to make sure your wrestlers are doing on their finishes. If they know how to finish quick, they explode their finish, they're not hanging out. They know how to swivel their ankles properly and get their weight back, and how to win those situations. You can keep those situations from arising, and then you can give them techniques and basically positioning knowledge and scrambling. They'll develop scrambling skills to win those situations. So you got to recognize that stuff is out there, and you have to teach them how to beat those situations or stay out of them. And when I was coaching high school, when I saw if I saw a team that I was going to have to compete against, and I saw them, you see it all the time, that all of a sudden you see them in the fall at a preseason tournament or whatever, early in the year or whatever, and you can tell they've been working some crazy system. I would just like, well, we got these guys. They're not going to catch us because our fundamentals are going to squash them. So, I mean, I do feel like there's certain things that especially across a program, if you're spending a lot of time trying to develop them, and they haven't been taught from a really young age, or they don't have these fundamentals down, you are wasting time. You're wasting time because a team that is sinking their teeth into the proven things that you can teach to everybody, that everybody can use to win, they're just going to progress that much quicker across the board.
Now, we've kind of beaten up the Granby system a little bit on this program and other situations. Now, just for devil's advocate purposes, there are a lot of things about that system that do not involve the actual role. There's a whole series of offenses and things, but from a role perspective, this is something that it kind of gets a bad reputation. But I understand you've got a Gable story when it comes to the Granby.
Yeah, you got to understand. I've got tremendous respect for what Coach Martin did at Granby. And the Granby Roll is a marketing thing. You got to, and I look back at that and think about that. That was like back in the day when old man Martin put it together. That was a way to stand out and get people to come to camps and you can teach that. If they get good at Granby's, man, you can get, especially at those younger levels. They can throw up those 5-point reversals but as they get older, and as you get to big national level stuff, they weren't focusing on that all the time. They had some really, really solid fundamentals and techniques, and they had single legs and all kinds of great turns. And but yeah, it's a marketing thing. The Granby Roll was a marketing thing, and those guys were learning some high level wrestling as they were going through that program. But yeah, a funny story is. I talked to Coach Gable, and I was with another Granby guy, and we just got talking about how he wrestled for Coach Martin, and Coach Gable, he goes, "Yeah, Granby Roll. I like the Granby Roll. It's good for scrambles and stuff, but building your world around it, I don't know about that." He goes, "You got to be on the bottom to hit a Granby Roll. You want to be on the bottom? I don't." So, thinking you have to spend all your time mastering this elaborate system on the bottom might be a little bit of a waste of time. But like I said, that was a marketing thing. They were working all kinds of great stuff, really high level stuff, and they were doing things right. But it's just a kind of funny story how Gable looked at it from afar.
So we're going to recap the standards of learning. We've got the evolution, we've got the series and the goals. And when you're coaching kids, and regardless of any age, I mean, we're the 5-year-olds to the 15-year-olds, what are some of the most important things to learn or to know when implementing any system, whether it be one where you like the 2-on-1 tilts, whether it be a Granby-based system, whether it be more of a straight just, smash through and power through type of system?
Well, I mean, I think some of the first things you got to teach, about obviously good stance. You got to teach good deep sprawls and down blocks and defense, how to clear your legs when, not just a sprawl, but when you got to do drills. So if they do hit a shot on you and you sprawl and they still got their hands on your leg, you got to know how to clear those legs, front headlocks. One thing that it took me a while to figure out, you want to get in there, and hand fighting and physical wrestling is a huge part of what I believe in. But when kids are just starting out, learning to wrestle and hit faking ties, faking shots for your setups is typically the easiest way to get kids scoring leg attacks. Where they're learning when they're doing this, they're learning how to move their feet, how to circle, how to fake, like I said, fake ties, fake shots. So I think you got to teach kids how how to do that, work their front headlocks, obviously get stand-ups ingrained in their head in the bottom position. And then, you got to be realistic as competition gets better. You're not just gonna be able to hit stand-ups all the time. So you got to be able to chain wrestle from there and hit your rolls and your switches and your sit-outs and stuff like that. But the bottom position should fundamentally be built off of the stand-up and then top, forward pressure. There's some basic, top position is a lot of style, but there's some basic turns from the top position that everybody should know. They should know how to break a guy down, run a half Nelson. They should know how to work cradles. It's the deadliest hold in wrestling. There's fundamentals in all those areas that entire programs can be built off of before you really have to expand much further.
That'll wrap up this episode of Attack Style Wrestling with the standards of learning. Check out all the standards that Daryl puts out there at attackstylewrestling.com, and check out the Gable Train members only area as well at gabletrain.com.
Show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.